document and
I looked at yours and then I did make some changes to my recommendation letter there in the end, just to kind of
There's Mitra.
reflect a bit. Oh, okay. Is she there?
Well, she's trying to.
Ah, good.
Hi, I made it.
Hey,
yay.
all right.
Yay.
So we
Sorry,
can-
I didn't see a link to get on the meeting, so
so we can
Thanks
start,
for-
Lucy.
Grabbing a pen. I'll be right back.
Okay, your
Yeah, I
recording
think-
is started.
Okay, great. So we'll start this meeting of the Offset Committee for the Eugene Sustainability Commission, and we're all here that I think can attend. And our agenda for today is to see just how far we can get toward reconciling a couple of proposals, and hopefully, you know, our goal is to finally someday be done. So we're getting there, I think. So I'll let Laura describe what her intent was with her proposed new version, then I can respond, and we can all just see which one or how we can maybe merge those together to create something.
Okay.
So,
Yeah, so thanks. It was going to be like way too messy, so I wanted to share
Sure.
my kind of a clearer version. That's why I made a new document.
Sure.
But I basically had some kind of fundamental disagreements with the recommendations that I mean, happy to talk about them, but I just did not agree with them. So I can't really be part of a committee that don't agree with the recommendations. We want to feel good about that. And the main one is recommending that the council change the CRO. I just feel like it's not a helpful recommendation. It's not practical. We see how long it takes to get things through council. And it's just, yeah, I just really don't think it's a helpful strategy for this group. So I don't think we should have that at all in there. And I was thinking about what I do think we should recommend, and I wrote those down. So maybe we could just start talking about the recommendations and see if there are ones we agree with, and then that will guide what goes into the body of the document.
Well, I just had one comment with respect to the length, and I noticed that you really cut out quite a bit of our report. And I think that I understand the need for brevity, but I kind of feel like that's why we're adding a cover letter to it. You know, we might hope that most of the council will read the cover letter, and maybe a third to a half might read the report. But I think we did a lot of work there. I mean, we looked into what's wrong with the offset purchases. We looked into kind of the EPA things and what maybe some local, if you think about doing some actions, what that might take to do. And then we talked with EWEB and Mackenzie River Trust and Longtown Watershed. You know, I mean, we did quite a bit of work there. And I think that probably you're right. Most of the council may not read that, but for those that are interested, I mean, we did quite a bit of work there, and I think that would be quite educational or helpful for them to be able to see. So I really wouldn't want to throw that away, is the way I was thinking about that. So that's kind of before the recommendation piece. I just think that, you know, we've been at it for about 6 months, and I think we did dig up some good information. I would hate to just get rid of that. Jan had a hand up.
Yeah, I was just going to add that I think it's helpful to have that stuff recorded somewhere anyway, even if we should decide that the report to council needs to be shorter. I think I was okay with that stuff being in there, and I think it's helpful to have that recorded for us to even ourselves to refer back to, or other people later. So
Yeah, go ahead, Laura.
Yeah, maybe we could have appendices based on each of the different groups we talked to. And some of the stuff, since it's going through council, like EWEB, you know, they don't want all of the conversations recorded, made public through the report. So that was what EWEB officially agreed we could share is I recorded that, but we can't share anything more than that because it would
okay,
through the proper
Okay.
channels. Because this will all be, you know, public record.
I see.
What goes to council.
Yes.
But yeah, go ahead, Mitra.
yeah, I mean, this has definitely gotten a little confusing because I know we've talked about a cover letter and appendices and recommendations, and this is my first like time doing this, so I'm a little lost. It might be helpful to just like maybe all get on the same page about like what we want to do in like, so currently I've heard that one of the recommendations is not supported by all of us, so we should definitely look what those are and review that, I think. The report needs to be more extensive, and I agree that we've done a lot of that. But I also can see how whatever the first, like, when we submit this to council, do we want like the recommendations in the cover letter? Like, I'm just not familiar with the protocol of how this goes. Like, they obviously want to kind of consume the gist of our work in as little time possible, with the ability to extend their knowledge if need be. What should that look like, I guess?
Well, I don't think there's any fixed answer to that, but I think you're right. The cover letter would essentially summarize very briefly and make it clear what our recommendation is, and then just refer them to the report for the details of the work we did, and so which is the supporting work. But the cover letter should basically have the message that we want to get across from that work, I think. And,
So-
assuming that's just a one-page thing, they look at it, they read it, they say, okay, that's what they did. And then
So we want a one-page cover letter that includes the recommendations, and then we want a report, and then we want appendices also.
if we need appendices, I mean, the only appendix I had before was the EPA pages, but we could just have a link to the EPA thing. We don't really need to put that in there essentially. So, but yeah, so I would think we're trying for two things probably. And I think there's something different about the report versus the recommendation. I mean, that's a report of the work we did, which I think is important. I think we did dig up some interesting information there myself. So,
Wait, can you repeat what you just said, Art? Did you say you think
no, I
there
got-
isn't a difference, or there is a difference between the report and the recommendations?
No, definitely. I mean, I think the report should be supportive of the recommendation we're giving. So we're
Oh,
going
yeah.
to, and I think that's what we did. We kind of, we researched and found some good reasons why offsets are problematic and off from the market there. We did some work on, suppose you want to do this project or that project. Oh, I see. It's going to take quite a few of those. If you think you're going to convert a house from gas to things, we're going to have to do, whoa, okay. But that's something we clearly want to do in town, and we need to find a strategy to do that. But I'm not sure we have that. And then we did talk with groups. Okay, well, what are the possibilities for local offsets now or in the future? And we found that at least now there's nothing available, but EWIP is moving toward trying to develop a protocol for doing that. And there's the Mackenzie River Trust and the other ones that are other watershed councils that are doing habitat restorations and things that would be good things to invest in. But and they're actually selling them as offsets, but they admit that they're not, quote, legal offsets. They're a way that people can pay back from their emissions. So I think having that in one document and then having a cover letter that says what that document implies is kind of the thing we want.
So should we go through and like outline the cover letter and the recommendations, and then go in and take all the supplementary expanded information to include it in the report that justifies those
Well,
suggestions? Is that how
We've
you?
got two versions of a report already. I don't think we need to start from scratch to build. a
No,
new
I'm
one.
not suggesting we start from scratch. I'm suggesting we clean it up, because it seems like we're all on different pages and things are getting a little messy. So I'm just suggesting we maybe like agree on the format of this, and then like pick and choose the work we've already done and place it in the right places within that format, maybe.
Okay, what's Laura saying?
Yeah, why don't we go through the recommendations? Because that will
Yeah.
drive what's in the report. We don't need to have things that we don't recommend in the report. We want.
Right. And so I updated my recommendation letter, and I hear what Laura's saying, and I want to say one thing about recommending changing the CRO. I'm not proposing we recommend that at all. What it is it's the truth of the situation, as Matt indicated to us in his email, and what's been happening so far is that given the way the CRO is written right now, the only option the city has is to go on the market and buy these verified carbon offsets. If the council wants to do something different in the short term, they're going to have to change the CRO. We could just say that. I mean, that's not saying we recommend you do that. It's saying, I mean, that's what we looked into, and that's what we see as the case. We just can't ignore that and then say, oh, invest in things for the community, because they just can't do that and claim that they're doing offsets at this point. Laura and then Jan.
Go ahead, Jan, if you want to go first.
Well, that was the kind of the way it struck me too, that when we had discussed this before as a group, I understand why I included that in the report, because we did discuss that and saying we need to say that. So that was a kind of a question for you, Laura, because your recommendations aren't really recommendations. They're more, the committee emphasizes here's, some things we should do, but it doesn't address that those things don't necessarily meet the requirements of the CRO right now. So I agree with you that it's not likely or practical or necessarily even desirable to try to tackle changing the CRO. But I think there is some reality to acknowledge that even if they were to follow our recommendations, we wouldn't be meeting the specifics of the CRO. Isn't that right?
That's not what I heard. I heard that if, like, let's say they sat down with eWeb hypothetically and did a project where it would reduce the same amount of emissions as the city was emitting, so it balanced out, and did that project, that would meet the CRO. It doesn't have to be a verified offset. It just has to prove or show that it is offsetting that much carbon or reducing that much carbon. So I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but I think we heard the same things. And
Okay.
Samantha also said the same thing. She said, no, it doesn't have to be purchased on the market, but it has to have some like background, like you have to be able to show how it's reducing the carbon, which these
Okay,
projects like with the watershed groups, they can't, because they don't have any idea. But if it was,
right.
with eWeb, if they converted, in some factory, something that was run on gas to electricity, and they knew exactly what it would do, that would meet it. So that's what I'm working off
I
of.
see what you're saying. And do you actually think we can accomplish that within, because we have to be within this year, right?
I mean, I don't think anything's going to change this year, but this report is like gearing towards the future direction. That's how I see this, as steering future direction.
Right, I agree with that too, but I guess what I'm saying is, and I haven't checked back at the CRO language again, but isn't that on an annual basis that they have to do something? They have to either buy the offsets or, so it's likely that they will have to buy offsets again this year, because that would be the,
But do we need to say that in a report? I mean, that's like,
right, okay, okay.
It just seems like really unnecessary to say something like that in a report to me.
Okay,
I'm
just
heard,
trying to get clear.
I also heard what Laura heard from our inquiries. It was confusing, and it was definitely coming down to like, what does the verifiable mean? And I did hear some of that come back as making sure it was a specific amount and trackable and measurable, but not necessarily like that word. It's really coming down to that word. And is it our job? I'm asking you all this because I don't know this. Is it our job to interpret that for the city council, or is it just our job to put forward those recommendations, and they will define and interpret that as they feel they.
Well, I can't find, I mean, that sounds fine, Laura, except that I don't believe eWeb can do that. And that's kind of what they said with their forest project, is that they're at least looking forward there to see with the U of O if they can develop some way to evaluate things. And you're right, they are trying to find that out, but I don't believe it's within a year or two. That's not what I was hearing, but you're right. I mean, that is the goal. And I think eWeb is the place to look toward being able to do that in the future. And there's a variety of ways of doing it, but plus I never heard eWeb say that they would know what a factory or something like that would do. I mean, I think they are trying to, their first priority is to find a way up the Mackenzie so that they can sell offsets to their customers. because now they're going on the market, the U of O is, they want to have that green program where their customers can offset their carbon. And they want to do it up to Mackenzie. That'd be very cool. Everyone, in town could, oh, wow, I
Love
contributed.
to do that. Yeah.
And then they said eventually, though, they would like to work with companies or the city in terms of, it would involve buying other forest tracts and things like that, scaling up what they're doing to be able to do that. So, I mean, I hear it coming, and I think that's definitely what we want to be recommending that they're looking toward. And we could just say that. I mean, we don't have to say that, I'm sure staff will tell them, no, you can't, that's not going to do it this year, and probably next year and the year after, maybe, but maybe they'll eventually get there. I'm definitely not, and that's why I was kind of leaving it as an if. You're right. We could say, if you want to do more right now in the short term, you're going to have to change the CRO and leave it at that. They won't do that, and they'll do. So, I mean, I don't see that's us recommending to do that. To me, it's just where we are. And you're right. It would be nice sometime in the future if eWeb is able to do those evaluations, but I don't believe it's very close yet. I didn't hear them saying it was that close. Mitra.
Coming back to the definition of verified, I'm still confused because I feel like a couple of us are interpreting that as verified, meaning measurable, and then
Right.
the whole talk of changing the CRO means verified is officially verified through the verification process. Those are two completely different interpretations, which will lead to very different recommendations in my understanding. So I'm just trying to see, are we all on the same page of the definition of verified? And like, are we just gonna go with two different interpretations of that? Because I can see that seems to be the source of the problem in my understanding. Is that, because otherwise all that data from the
EPA.
the equations that we looked at, that is measurable. And so that could be more actionable, even in a shorter timeline than the eWeb stuff, potentially, if you're interpreting verified as measurable, as opposed to officially verified through a verification process that's paid for and whatnot.
Can I jump in, Laura, and then I'll turn it to you? I found that email that I had from Matt, because I was trying to figure out what's their interpretation of and how did it go. And so he says, I checked in with Brooke and reviewed some of the information Chelsea and Samantha had presented to the climate recovery policy team at the city last year. My understanding is that we're not required to purchase offsets that are verified through a certification body. We agree with that. However, we must have a reasonable way to verify that the offsets we purchase or projects we invest in do eliminate the greenhouse gas emissions needed to make operations carbon neutral. So, there has to be somebody who's willing to give us an equation, be it eWeb if they can do it or something, that actually says you've eliminated that and we have to be carbon neutral, because the city is claiming they will be carbon neutral, not just doing a good job or something like that, Okay, Laura.
So I fundamentally don't think the city should invest in purchasing offsets that aren't going to reduce carbon for decades, when they could be using that same money to actually reduce carbon emissions. So if this was just me writing my own recommendations, like I would recommend that they, number one priority, if they can, reduce existing emissions, use that money to actually cut back on carbon emissions. And then number two would be like, if that's not working out for whatever reason, then, the local offset purchase. And it would be, so we had that EPA data, but if, we know it's not going to be exactly right for this local area. And when I talked to eWeb, they said that they would definitely be willing to be, it would be a conversation, because they'd have to create like a custom project to make sure that they're offsetting, or not offsetting, that's the wrong word, but reducing the same amount of emissions. And it probably, though, of course, they can't say for sure, would come out of their industrial customers, because that way it's just a lot easier to know how much like one project can reduce a certain amount of emissions. Yeah, bigger and more for a variety of reasons. So we can't, providing like EPA data, I don't know if that's really going to be helpful, knowing that the entity who would actually do it is saying that probably it wouldn't go that way. It wouldn't be like a whole bunch of houses Because they also can't really know, people, they're finding that people get a rebate for fuel switching, but then they don't actually remove the gas thing. And so they might be using both now. So residential is a less certain place to focus on, though, of course, maybe they would. So yeah, anyway, I think us strongly driving, like encouraging that conversation would be the best thing to do, because we as a group we can't know what the project would be, but we can know that we think that if we do agree that that's the direction to go, is to look for projects that will reduce emissions that would be partnership with EWEB.
Yeah, well, I support that. I don't know what to say, in terms of that those are all good things to do. And I think if there wasn't a CRO and it demanded carbon neutrality, we would all agree with that statement right up front. I mean, what are we talking about? Let's just get on with it and lower your emissions and work with EWEB to find some projects in town and do the best you can.
Maybe we could just, I agree with that. I think I agree with what you're saying, Laura, that's obviously where the priority should be. And we should do what we can to encourage the city to focus on that more. I just, it seems pretty clear that even with additional effort, that's not going to be effective in this year. But like you say, maybe we don't need to address that. We just need to try to push them on making more progress on those, on the actual reductions.
And actually, when I get back, okay, great.
Well, I was going to say, when we started this, we were looking at what the CRO required and how we could meet that in a better way. And I don't know that. I think it's just trying to put some more emphasis and pressure on getting more progress faster.
Mm-hmm.
Check. Good.
So is it okay if I talk now?
Yep.
Okay. So should we be putting forward a recommendation first and foremost to reduce emissions? So it's kind of like an order of operations. Is that what you're suggesting, Laura? Like, first and foremost, we really don't agree with the concept of offsets, and that can be supported in the appendix or the report with this information that you found about the impact of offsets and, that it's not accomplishing stuff. And then secondly, maybe finding local ways that are verifiable in the respect to, can be proven to reduce carbon locally and measurable would be step number 2, as opposed to purchasing offsets in other areas. And then maybe step 3 could be keeping an eye on and actively participating in conversations with partners like EWEB for a longer term solution. Like, we know that's not going to happen in the next year, but at least initiating those conversations now and keeping an eye and taking intentions to start that process. Is that what our recommendations would be looking like then?
I think it's something like that. I actually have changed the letter that I had that I think is more in line with what Laura had. If we could maybe look at that.
I'll try to
link to my letter. It was in an email that I sent out recently.
I'll see if I can try to get over to that. Art.
So it's way at the bottom, kind of the cover letter or memorandum or whatever I was calling it, way at the bottom of what I was proposing. So I got rid of that horrible amend the CRO phrase, even though I actually brought that up with Emily one time, and she said that, well, it's possible if depending on why or what we were recommending. But I mean, I kind of agree that it's not going to be something that the council's going to want to take up anyway. And so it might be the case that if they want to do something different, that's what they're going to have to do in the short run. But so.
Would it be helpful to include in this letter, and I'm not sure if it does or not, the definition of verified that we have been finally settling on after our inquiry? so that's not like a point of stumbling even when it gets to the council, like in understanding this report and recommendation.
I don't know, because I mean, I would just quote Matt's letter there, you know, in other words, either they don't have to buy verified things from the market, but that has to be verifiable in the sense that you just can't do something and say, oh, this is good because it's reducing carbon. You have to say it actually does reduce 6,000 metric tons of carbon, you know, and there has to be some belief, some way of believing that is really what's required. It just can't be something
Is-
good to do, you know.
Is
so-
that
so-
included in the letter? Or report?
No, I don't know. That's an interesting thing because I mean, I think that is currently the staff's interpretation, and I think it was the city council's interpretation, or the city council goes along with that interpretation when they bought the offsets, even though they maybe don't really want to buy it. No one wants to buy the offsets. I don't think we have to tell them, gee, don't buy offset. You know, I mean, that was kind of why we're kind of doing this, you know, and could we find a magic bullet? Well, not quite yet, but we think that working with eWeb in the future may provide a magic bullet in a few years. And I think that's kind of the best we can do. So I don't know if you can.
Art, I'm looking for your updated report. Do you know what day you sent that? Because I have the one,
It got in a conversation. It was the 6th of March.
6th of March. That's way back when.
So,
Oh, no.
so let me see. How come, you know, I have this, I should get rid of this, how my emails get into a conversation, you know what I mean? And then it'd be nice for you. No,
Okay, I've got one here that says,
here it is. It was the 7th of, no, Laura, from Laura. Shoot.
I've got one that has, our full report is attached. The results are as follows. Given the current CRO's requirement of carbon neutrality, it appears that the only reasonable available path in the short term is continue to purchase verified carbon offsets.
Is this the memo you're, right?
Yeah, this is the.
Well, that's the
summary.
report, right? So go way to the bottom of that, I think, if you're looking.
That's what I'm looking at.
Huh,
The memorandum and to this from Sustainability Commission to Council, consideration of carbon offsets. I just don't know whether this is the first version
Okay.
or the second
I'll
version.
send it. Can I maybe share my screen? What the heck am I doing?
That would be good. That would be good.
Okay. Where is this? Is that it? What do we see now?
I see the top of the memo. Okay, that's the one I'm looking at, I think. All right.
Are you seeing something that I'm rolling?
Yeah,
So that's what I'm proposing as our letter.
okay. All
Can you
right.
see that now?
Yeah,
So our full report is provided. So maybe this is kind of the recommendation here. So given the current CRO's requirement of carbon neutrality by 2020, it appears that the only reasonable available path in the short term is to continue purchasing verified carbon offsets from a recognized offset provider with preference for regional projects as done for 2020. In the longer term, there are possibilities for participating in verified local carbon sequestration projects, primarily with eWeb, that is working to develop a verified program for local forest projects in the Mackenzie River Valley. The Mackenzie River Trust and local watershed councils are also interested in developing possible habitat restoration programs. And actually, I realized what I wanted to add and what we haven't done and we haven't harped on, and the city council hasn't been following up on it all, is whatever path is taken, additional funding is needed to make the investments needed to lower the city's operational carbon emissions, which is what Laura's saying. I mean, that, you know, put some
like
money into that, because the more you do that, the less offsets you buy, and to invest in offset activities. And we have to press them again. That kind of, they had a work session on funding, and I don't know whether anything's come of that. So, I mean, actually, that should be part of this recommendation again, is, hey, to do either offsets or to reduce your own carbon things, you need to get some more money, and we need.
right. I like that. So I would say that now looking at this and having looked at Laura's, I kind of like Laura's short and sweet recommendations. I would maybe add to, I kind of agree that this first one of yours, Art, it's like sort of stating the obvious maybe. But I think with the first one on Laura's,
Okay,
it would be good to include saying, even if it is somewhat obvious that we believe because of the problems of offsets, we believe we should move away from them as quickly as possible and instead invest more in reducing emissions. Make the investments needed. So I like that piece. I think those could get melded together.
okay. So,
Just put them in the chat just so you could see. So if you want to see it, and I changed it to summary of results since they aren't all recommendations.
did you put the chat there?
Yeah, I just
Yeah,
dropped it in the
oh,
chat.
thank you, thank
Oh,
you.
here, great, excellent, Laura, thank you. So this is what you had in yours there.
Yeah,
And that will
So-
go
so-
in the letter. This will go in the letter.
those, yeah, in the cover letter as a summary, I like being really clear and upfront with this first piece. Carbon offsets are problematic for reasons, because since they don't actually reduce emissions. And we believe the city of Eugene should move away from using offsets as soon as possible. And that would be a sort of a tacit acknowledgement that that can't maybe happen tomorrow, but we should be working on it. And then these others follow pretty well from there.
These other. So you're looking at her proposed letter,
Yes,
right?
yeah, I'm looking at the those results that you just put in the chat.
Okay, right.
And then adding your last piece
That's
there
fine.
about whatever path, you know.
Yeah, I like them in the upcoming years, right? So I
Yeah.
mean, it's not like it's imminent, but you know, it should be coming. Yeah, Mitra?
I feel like the wording of Laura's suggestions that is more in line with what we just discussed, of like, first and foremost saying we want to see moving away from carbon offsets. Secondly, focusing on reducing emissions locally. And again, you know, it feels really different to me. Then it might just be a wordsmithing thing, but
It's a
When-
more positive, more gentle as opposed to.
it's
saying-
not more gentle. When I read what you wrote, it seems like it's saying, okay, just keep doing, the first thing I read is just keep doing what you did before. And like, that's kind of lets them off the hook of like, okay, well, there you go. And whereas it's not like, no, this is problematic. We don't really want to see that happen,
Right,
you know. And then with the different interpretation of verify is like, yeah, we want to see this money be spent more locally. We want to trace and track and try to see this money go into local projects. And that leaves room for them to explore working with UAB in the future, or looking at other ways that could look, you know, because we haven't by any means exhausted the potential ways that could go about if someone really were to invest more energy into this, I think. And then, yeah, I mean, some of the same elements are present in the other wording. I just feel like this one flows a little bit more with what we had just discussed about like putting them in an order, because we're here to represent the voice that we've heard, that there is dissatisfaction in the community with the purchasing of offsets. And for some reason that just doesn't come through really clearly in
Very
the
good.
wording of the other letter. And maybe
Very
there's some option of like splicing the two together.
no, not too much. I would, in Laura's, maybe like the city of Eugene to focus on reducing its own operational emissions, but and funding projects. So it's not clear that, you know, I would add that about its own operation.
Yeah, yeah, that's
And
good.
Then if we could add what I had as my last sentence, because I think it's an opportunity to be harping on them that they need to raise more money. So whatever path is taken, additional funding is needed to make the investments to lower the city's operational carbon emissions and to invest in offset activities. I mean, you know, that shouldn't be dropped, and they seem to have I mean, maybe they haven't dropped it, but I don't know when it's coming back for another.
Well, there's budget committee meetings coming up and I haven't been tracking them, but there, hopefully there's something in there. We'll have to take a look at that.
Right, right. But I think it's beyond probably the budget committee. I mean, and there was a suggestion that they would need a bond measure for both homeless and sustainability,
Climate.
what had been
Yeah.
proposed. And then I don't, hadn't been proposed, but that's what they were talking about. And I haven't
Right.
seen that come back up to life. So it's our chance to maybe in a last sentence here, harp a little bit more on that one last time. So anyway, that's good. I like Laura's 3 sentences. If we add a 4th one to it about the funding, then maybe we have a nice brief letter there.
Like I said, I would appreciate, or I think it would be helpful to add to that her first bullet. We recommend the city move away from using
Uh-huh.
offsets as quickly as possible.
Okay.
Something to that effect.
Mhm. That fits too. Uh-huh. You doing that, Laura? I see you look like you're intentional. You're intent on doing something. Great. Okay.
Laura, I'd be interested to know if you think it would be beneficial to add just a little bit more of the wording or something like it that Art had, that specifies the Mackenzie River work, partnering with UWeb regarding, just because it's something people know and could recognize.
Yeah, we could, maybe that would be in the report. I
Yeah,
was,
I was
yeah, I was, the thing
definitely,
I was,
hopefully it's in the report,
Yeah,
but I was
the-
just thinking maybe if,
the
ahead.
second point was not that at all. It was actually like
Oh.
reducing emissions through partnership with eWeb. Like eWeb identifies through a custom partnership, they identify a factory that if they just had a little more money, they could do this switch out. And so through
Okay.
this project, it actually reduces the emissions. That was like,
right,
and then the next one is the local carbon sequestration.
right.
So
Okay.
I was trying to make them distinctly different projects.
Yes, I get it. You're right. I see that. I was just thinking of just trying to drop the words Mackenzie River watershed in there just because people would recognize it, but that's not necessary maybe. I think that's good. Thank you.
Well, it seems like we're close to a letter, right?
Right.
Oh, amazing. Okay. And then, so now I guess, thanks, Laura, that was good. Yeah, no, you're right. I mean, obviously, I totally agree that we should get off carbon offsets. And so my first note about given the current CRO is kind of a bummer statement on my part. Saying, well, unfortunately, this is where we are. We're kind of stuck there. So this kind of puts it in a more positive way and tries to move it, saying that it isn't what we want to be doing. We want to move away. Right. So now we move away as quickly as possible. So that's all good. I think that gives them something to work on it, and the focus. It looks like mostly, yeah. We mentioned the other groups too, so it's cool. All right. So now I guess it's a matter of how much do we want to hack out of the report? I'd still like to leave in some of the work we did. I kind of agree that, since I've done the EPA stuff, I was trying to put a little bit of that in there. And I think it's in the ballpark of what's maybe reasonable, but maybe we don't need it. But we did talk to those other groups and also, I mean, I think, anyway, so let's say, have we agreed on a letter? We haven't seen it, but we see it right here. This is what it is, right? Okay. So you would put like a memorandum or letter above that, and the date and the to and from and stuff like that, right? So it'll look like an official kind of thing from the commission. Okay, good. Okay. So then, very good. So
Well, just to be clear, we're not agreeing on this one that you're sharing, right? We're agreeing on the one that we just talked about.
in the chat, the one
Okay,
that
yeah,
we
okay.
see in the chat.
In
With
the chat.
Yeah, with
Okay.
the
There's no-
appropriate formatting around it and all that. It was just,
Okay.
she's nodding to some extent there. So I think that's happening. Okay. So then, well, if people I'm still sharing that document that I had, that's the long version. So maybe we could see what we wanted to take out of that. Maybe if there's anything we could save beyond what Laura had. So we had verified carbon offsets are problematic, and I think we've kept most of that. We agree with that stuff there. Local verifiable offsets, so that's what we're saying, allows for local verifiable offsets. These are local projects that can demonstrate verified carbon reduction, as opposed to being verified carbon offset in
Awesome.
quotes, or whatever. And so we're mentioning a little bit about where we are, how much there is. Here I say UWeb has been monitoring a variety of actions and gets results that differ from the EPA values. They are trying to assess what are accurate numbers for this area as UWeb explores possible offset actions of its own emissions. So I mean, I think,
So
yeah,
we don't
well,
have, I mean, we don't have permission to share stuff that eWeb is in the middle of doing. They would not want that to go to
Is that right?
council. Yeah, so that was not meant to go to council. So
I see.
um,
All right, I could just take that out of there.
yeah, I did. So I wanted to say, when we met with the council for the kind of end of the year, I forget what the name of the meeting was, when Matima and I met, it was very clear that more is not better for counselors. In all forms of more is not better. So I think we really should be as succinct as possible, and we can be available. So if whoever the staff person is to work on this wants to get all the stuff we found out, I think that's great, but I don't think we need to put it all in the report. And if others want to put it all, then I think appendices can really help just streamline it, because when you're busy, you want to bullets, you know,
Mhm.
just we want it to be easy to digest.
Yeah.
So yeah, I just wanted to say that before
Yep.
we go more.
I guess my reaction is
I think you're right.
and then I'm saying, sorry, Jan, so you go, Jan. Oh,
Me? No, I'm just trying to hear what you're saying. You're breaking up a lot.
yeah, no, I should turn it over to Jan. You guys had your hands up. I'll comment in a little bit. So Jan and then Mitra.
But I didn't mean to have my hand up.
Oh. Mitra.
I do think the EPA information is important. I found it really interesting. Maybe if we could include that as an appendices portion, I would support that. I really thought that was an interesting way to just understand that there are impactful things that can be done locally. And it was driving to me to like look into and kind of go down that path mentally of like, oh, these are some possibilities. These are traceable, measurable things that have been done and that are verified. So if I agree that it should be a concise report and that they're not going to look at that, but I do think a lot of work was done on your part, Art, and I found that information really interesting. So if everyone is in agreement that that could be kept as an appendices.
Again, I guess my thought was, you know, we bent over backward not to send the council almost anything this year, it seems to me, you know, so, I mean, but what like I was saying, I think that we've done our job by having a one-page memo, you know, the memorandum, here it is. And then, I mean, I would say if we can get all the councilors to read that, that's great. And if we can get a third of them that might say, oh, there's more pages here, I can't read it. But I'm sure there's maybe half of the council that might be interested in some of the background we found out and that we had, and plus these future local opportunities that we talked to eWeb and Long Tom and the Willamette Stewart. You know, I'm sure at least there's a subset of them that would be kind of interested in seeing that. And I didn't want to really throw away the work we'd done and make it look like we just met for once or twice and came up with these 4 sentences. You know what I mean? I mean, that was my feeling. And I understand what you're saying, that they got it. And I think we're trying to, I mean, I feel we're accommodating that by having a one-page memo that reports from us. And then the few counselors that are interested may want to look at this. So I could get rid of the whole results part. We get rid of the results section. So it's only, so our report is 3 pages there. So it's not that bad. And I give a link to the EPA, I think. So no, I don't. Well, do I? I guess not. In the attached appendix, I see. So I just, maybe what I could do rather than having even the table I did and stuff like that. Oh, well, I mean, yeah, that was interesting to me. I mean, so maybe they would find it interesting. Oh, gee, we'd have to plant 100,000 trees to get, I mean, I think some of that's kind of interesting for the council just to see how much they are emitting, and how much, what it would take to do that. They just can't invest in a couple of trees in town and say they're anywhere near what we need to get rid of, which maybe would motivate doing more work. But anyway, Jan, you got your hand up, Jan?
Yeah, now I do have my hand up. And you all have been, for me, has the sound been breaking up for you? Because for all of you, for me to everybody, so I'm not sure, I'm sure you've said things that I haven't heard, so I apologize if I'm contradicting something you just said or, duplicating it, but can you hear me all right?
Yep.
Yeah, okay, I'm not sure what's going on, but I would agree that I'm leaning toward what Laura had to say, that I think we should keep this part, maybe 2 pages, 2 to 3 pages is probably okay, but I would not go more than that. And I would, I do think there is some interesting information that we should either just keep for ourselves or add as appendices, because I think it's good not to lose it. But I think, and letting them know that we have it, but I think keeping what we give them short is a benefit. And so I can't speak to some of the specific pieces here, how you would do that, but I think that's important. Thanks.
Well, it'd be good if we could finish up the committee this month, no? Now that we have a letter.
Yes.
So if we throw away the last page, which was about the results and a conclusion, and we just leave that in the letter, which we now have a very nice, short, I think, clear letter there, then the rest of this just is 3 pages and let's get some back, it says why they're, I mean, I think a lot of it, what we have here is important. It's why are they problematic? We get some nice discussions.
Why, I think that's important.
Some about the local offsets and just a sense of even if we don't have the appendix on the EPA, we can, I have one example here. To get rid of that, you'd have to plant 100,000 urban trees and tend them for 10 years to be able to get that much offset and things like that. So, and then there's some opportunities here. We talk about eWeb, hopes to develop a methodology. And so maybe those 3 pages are relatively quick and to the point. Laura, and then Mitra.
Yeah, I'm just gonna ditto getting it into an appendix. And if there's things like the habitat restoration, that is though important. It's really not what this is about. So I don't think we really want to have so much language around that, just because it's different and they're offering it for people to buy into, but it's not actually a carbon offset.
Right.
The other thing is, if we're going to say about how many trees you have to plant, I wonder what the methodology was used in the project they purchased. Like, did they really plant 100,000 trees in Washington? Like, that would be curious to see that, because if it's really different, then I don't know. I just wonder is it like, should we put that in if it's distinctly different than how many trees they planted in Washington, or should we talk about that?
Yeah, I don't know how they found out, and they found that they bought that very cheaply too. So, one has questions about these offset projects, as we know, but I wouldn't be surprised if they planted that. I was surprised that Long Tom Watershed said that they've planted more than 1 million willow saplings over the last 10 years up along the river. So I mean, it could be 100,000 that somebody. And they said guy said one day they planted 60,000 trees in a day. So I mean, they get these people on it and know how to do it, and they just, you get a Hodad group up in the mountains that used to plant trees. I'm sure they, who knows how many trees they could plant in a day. Yeah, Mitra, and then we're almost done. We got to wrap up. So,
I do think it'd be cool to have the link to the EPA equations as an appendices, especially if you're talking about it there with the example of trees, because that is a carbon emissions related thing. And I also agree that we could whittle down the wording of this portion
last part.
yeah, if it isn't directly related to carbon emission reduction. And then I wanted to make sure that part that you just erased, is there anything in that that we could include in the appendices that would be helpful? I do, I'm like trying to reconcile in my head the best way to really show that we've done a lot of this work and have it available if someone wanted to look at it, but at the same time, having a really succinct, readable, palatable document that we can present. So I think the format of a cover letter, a brief but concise report, and then appendices feels really good to me.
Mhm.
And I'm trying to figure out what the appendices would look like, include.
So I could work a little more on that. I mean, I'll look at what Laura had. She had quite pared down. I thought we need a little more than that. So I could kind of try to work on paring this one down and taking in the comments we have now and see if we could get this report agreed upon. I don't know how we can do that without having to have a meeting.
Is it something
Well,
we could do via email?
Um,
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering.
Well, I don't know what our restrictions are. in
Since
terms-
we're kind of, I think we're agreed in principle.
Right.
And so if you're willing, Art, to do the work to try to find a happy medium somewhere, and just send it out by email, then if we could all agree to it, I think we should probably not be able to do that without a meeting.
Right. Maybe we can say that we agreed to that in the meeting.
If that's
I don't know.
kosher.
Anyway, Laura, and then we
Right.
should wrap up. Maybe.
Yeah, so when I revised the report, and you guys can see it, you have the link, I tried to make the headings match up with the recommendations. So that might be helpful just to make it easier to, oops,
That's a good point.
to make it easier
Yes.
to read. Cause like, so carbon offsets are problematic is one heading. And then we have local verifiable offsets, and there's two subsets. There's local carbon sequestration projects, and then there's local carbon reduction projects. So those are two distinct pathways. And then there's the recommendations. So that's basically everything I put in there, which is
Okay,
what we-
I'll look at
That's great.
it and try to see what we can do. So I'll send out a link to a new document in a few days, a couple days or something, or soon, probably, just to keep on it. Okay, so
I agree that trying to match up your headings with your recommendations is helpful for tracking for the council. Great.
So what I have in this is what we have, like you said, so verified carbon offsets are problematic. And then local offset opportunities, is that what you call them, Laura? Anyway, I'll look at your document, that's fine. So kind of combine these two documents and with a pared down version of those would be fine. So
Sounds good.
should we vote to agree? I move that we agree on the letter we have seen in the chat and a forthcoming mush together report that will be short, but to the point and at least represent the work that we did. I'll move that.
Yes,
Everyone,
a second.
all in favor? So
All in favor.
we'll call it a committee, and we have at least about 10 days still to get it together, which is good, because we're a week ahead there. So we want to get it by next Tuesday or next Monday, we'll say. We'll have it done. Okay.
Sounds
Whew.
great.
Well, finally, well,
Good job.
good work.
Okay.
Art and
Okay,
Laura in
good Lord,
particular.
Laura, thanks
Yeah.
for
Thank you.
making it positive and moving it. Okay, bye-bye.
Thank
All
you,
right,
guys.
thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
How do I get rid of this currently sharing? My screen stop share.